In this episode, you'll build AdSAP Studio, a full-stack generative AI software-as-a-service application that uses artificial intelligence to generate and enhance stunning product shots. We'll cover the entire software development workflow, starting from a user prompt, where the user will input a prompt for a production-ready image. And by using Bria's AI API, we'll create high-quality, stunning visuals in seconds, something which would take a professional photographer hours to produce. And then by leveraging Python and Cursor, we'll build a fast, responsive user interface and add AI-powered editing features like background replacement, lighting correction, and shadow rendering, all optimized for real-world marketing. By the end of this episode, you'll have a real deployable project you can showcase on your portfolio, use, and even monetize. We'll also refine the experience, add new features, and cover how to pitch it to real clients. Whether they're e-commerce brands, content creators, or agencies, tools like this can earn upwards to $10,000 or more per project and help you stand out amongst prospective employers. With that being said, let's get started building. You can learn more about Bria AI and its capabilities on their website at bria.ai. And essentially, this is a visually driven generative AI platform that allows developers to use licensed and trained datasets in order to create enhanced and consumer-friendly product shoots, imagery, and you can use this for an assortment of other editing features as well, such as generatively adding objects to an image or refining the resolution of an image, alongside things such as generatively erasing aspects of an image or changing the theme of an image. So you can see they outline the key features of Bria, including that they are fully licensed. They include stable and powerful tooling to allow you to access as a developer their different endpoints, which are features such as editing image or generatively creating an image using their API endpoints. And they also outline key features such as their editing and generation capability. You can also generate images with a specific brand context in mind. So let's say I wanted to generate a sequence of photos with a specific color palette or aesthetic theme to it. This will allow for tailored generation. And you can also create ads and leads at scale using their ad generation tooling as well. So in order to get started on their platform, you can click Start Now on their website, and this will prompt you with a method of logging in. You can provide your Google or your login credentials, or just log in with GitHub. I chose the GitHub option. And once you're done logging in, this will redirect you to their platform site on their dashboard, and you can check out and get more information about their other foundation models on their foundation models page. And you can learn more about their models and what's going on under the hood at any of these designation sites below, such as Hugging Face or AWS. So let's begin by outlining their image generation capability under the Image Generation tab. And if you can use these models on their page without providing any API credentials or doing anything code related on your end, by going under the Demo Playground tab. And under Demo Playground, we can try out their image generation suite. So I can click Image Generation. And let's select Bria 3.1 for our model. And you can specify the aspect ratio as well. I'll just go with the standard 4:3 aspect ratio. And the median, so selecting art under median will give you something more like a painting or drawing. And then photography is for a more realistic feel. So I will click Auto. And let's say I wanted a picture of a puppy playing in a yard. So I can go Generate. And this will give us 4 results of generated images. It takes a few seconds for images to be generated, but it's pretty quick. You can see generated a puppy playing in a yard. This one's a more cartoonish feel. This one looks more like a drawing. And I really like this one here. So another feature under the advanced section that you can use for Bria is something called a negative prompt. And a negative prompt is something you would like to exclude from an image. So let's say here I see a photo with a frisbee included in the dog's mouth. Let's say I don't want any photos with a frisbee included. So I would type in frisbee, and then we can generate more. Other settings you can optimize and change include the number of images. So currently the default is by 4, so it'll give us 4 outputs, but you can change it to whatever you like. You can also click enhance results, and this will create a higher quality output result with richer details, which does take a longer time to complete. You can also uptick the number of steps, and the steps gives more refinements for the image to be improved. So typically, as you increase the number of steps, you'll get a higher quality image. We'll set this to, I think, 39 for the next round. And then finally, the seed number. So the seed number, an increased seed number will give you a higher range of outputs. And what I mean by range of outputs would be like more randomness. So you can see we have a pretty consistent theme here of a puppy playing in a yard. This will just give more random results, which will give you more. The pro of that being that you have a more varied data set of images. However, you are going to be sacrificing on the model's, I would say, reasoning ability, where you will get more of a likelihood that you have weird outputs being generated. So we can set this to a number like 3, and let's generate the next sequence of images. And you can see here that the image did a reasonably good job at eliminating frisbees. This looks still like a frisbee in the dog's mouth, but you can see the resulted output included mostly photos that excluded a frisbee. So this goes to show that Bria still has some room for growth in terms of its the model's accuracy reading. And that's why it's important to keep the number of outputs up. I typically like to have this set on 4, so you have more options to pick from when it comes to some of these outputs. Awesome. So here we got a little bit more variety in terms of like things. So you can see this one had a baby in the background, and before, I guess that one had a baby in the background. This one is showing like a man's legs, which wasn't there before, and a different species of dog. You get more variety in terms of like the breed of dogs I'm seeing here. This one seems to have a red ball, so you can see that by upticking the scene number, I was able to get more thematically different outputs, and we also increased the step number in this case, and we clicked enhance results, and you can clearly see that the outputs here, we had no like cartoon graphic related outputs. We had pretty much entirely a collection of realistic outputs with varied outcomes. So let's say I wanted to edit one of these outputs here. We can go under the AI editor option, and this will allow us to customize and edit the photo. So let's say I wanted to change the dog. So we can add like a little party hat or like a little hat on top of this thing. We can go under their object section, and this has a magic brush that we can use. I will set the size of it to be about 60, and we can generatively add things to the image just by drawing over it. So let's say I wanted to add the hat on the dog. So I can draw there, and then under the generative fill section, I can say party hat. And hopefully this will give us an output that is reasonable. Yeah, so here it added a cute party hat on top of the puppy. This one was a pink party hat, and then we have the pink and blue party hat here. You can also use this to erase specific parts. So let's say I wanted to get rid of this bubble. You can draw over it, and then I can click erase here, and that will completely wipe out the bubble from our output. Nice. You can see it added a few like watermarks to the image, but it was able to wipe out the bubble and then fill it out in for us. I want to show you a better example of this. So let's say I just wanted to change the color of the dog's frisbee that he has in his mouth. So we can draw over the orange frisbee, and this will edit the image for us. So instead of an orange frisbee, we can have a red frisbee. And I also recommend having the number of results set to the maximum of 4 in this case, because sometimes the model will generate some like random results. Like in this case, it added a bow tie, a red bow tie. In this case, it erased the frisbee. So it seems like the model's adding bow ties, but you can see the gist of it. The model was able to generatively fill in aspects of the image that we did not want. It's very cool. The last feature is changing the background. So let's say I wanted to change the background of this specific photo, and we can do this by image or by text. So let's generatively create a new background for this. So let's say I wanted this to be at the beach. So we can click that and then hit generate. There we go. Yeah, so you can see this one, other than 2 that it generated where it seems to be at like a coastal greenery area, it was able to generate the picture of our dog running at the beach. You can also have other options such as selecting a solid color background or removing the background entirely. Just show that. And you can just get your object in the foreground with a transparent background. So this is useful for cases where, let's say you wanted to crop out a specific object from your image, as opposed to going on Photoshop, which might take you about a few minutes to crop out this puppy if you were to do it by yourself manually. Bria does it for us in seconds. You can also give feedback to the Bria models. So let's say I wanted more dogs that look like this. I could give it positive feedback, as vice versa. If I wanted less images with outputs that look like this, you can click this to give it negative feedback. You can also download the image by clicking on the export button here. The last feature I wanted to showcase for this image editing platform is the size and placement. So typically, if you wanted to adjust the aspect ratio, this is a 1:1 aspect ratio, to something like 3:4, you'll get a transparent looking output here where the bounding boxes up here are just cut out completely. Something really cool about Bria is by clicking on expand background with your adjusted aspect ratio, it will generatively think through how to replace the missing transparent sections with a new part. So you can see here, it did a really, really good job like filling in the the rest of this tennis player's body, and also filling up the foliage in the background and the foliage in the greenery down here, and maintaining like the cohesiveness of the image using its generative capabilities. So this is really, really helpful, especially if you're posting on specific social media platforms. Under the medium destination section here, you can select specific platforms that you would like to export this image for. So I can click on somewhere like Instagram, and let's say I wanted to post this as an Instagram story. I would click that, and then you can also increase the resolution. So let's say I wanted this to be twice the resolution. We can increase the resolution first. Nice, and then let's give it the story and expand the background. Nice. For more of Bria's functionalities, you can go back to their Playground Hub at this link here, platform.bria.ai / Playground Hub. And another really cool feature that I liked was the image search feature. And this pretty much provides an entire gallery of images. Think like Bing's photo section in the past, where you would scroll through like royalty-free photos. But in this case, you can download any of these images and you can customize them further. So let's say I wanted to see like pictures of astronauts. So go type in astronauts, and then you can click get images. And this will give us like a gallery-like output of images hosted on their platform. You can see that Bria provides us some labelless image search outputs for our keyword of astronauts. And I'm going to select out of these options here. I like this one the most. So let's say I wanted to refine this image a little bit more using AI's editing features. I can click customize. And this will give me pretty much the same options as before, where I can blur the background, I can remove the background, or I can generate a new background. We also have this object section where we can use the manual brush or the magic removal. So let's say I wanted to remove parts of his suit, like this part up here. I can highlight over it using my brush and then select remove objects. You can also do output sizing changing, where you can zoom in if you want to, you can zoom out. And we can crop out parts of the photo. You can also go back to profile and then select crop. That might make our output look a lot better. Cancel. So you can see we can just multiple options for customizing the look and feel of our outputted image. Back to their Playground Hub. One more option I wanted to show you guys is the text to vector graphics option. And this will allow us to create vector graphics generatively. So let's say I wanted to create graphics of a dolphin swimming in a ocean. So we can click on generate. And this generates pretty cool vectors of our inputted option. And also use a reference image. So let's say you already had an image. You can use it as reference. And then we can provide negative prompting and scene numbers and refining the number of steps as well. So you can see generated a pretty good vector of a dolphin. You can also provide feedback for the model as well and share it with Bria. For their image editing features, you will have to provide some images. So under the single mode option, we can select a image of your choice. Also under their Playground Hub is their image editing tooling. So here under single editing mode, we can select a specific image you would like to edit. So here I have an example image of this woman in a dress with her motorcycle. Okay. And let's say I wanted to adjust specific parts of this image. So what's really cool is using their dynamic brush again. I can specify the brush size, and then let's say I wanted to change this image so she had different shoes on. So instead of these like beige heels, you can select black boots. Click generate. And using our provided input, the model will infer what it should put in place of the highlighted sections of the photo. So in place of those beige heels that she had on before, it got rid of them and it put the black heels, the black boots in place of where like her other shoes were. And you can see it gave us 4 outputs. So I'll pick this one since I like this the best. You can also use their erase feature. So let's say I wanted to get rid of this watch in her hand. I can draw all over it, and then we can click the erase feature. You can see it did splatter the output photo a little bit, but it was able to completely get rid of the watch from her hand. So this photo isn't completely foolproof in regards to making a little bit of erroneous like output images, but it does get the job done in terms of what we were trying to do. I'm going to go back a step to our previous image where she has the watch on her hand, and let's try updating the background. So instead of this house in the background, we can specify somewhere else, so maybe a city. And we can click generate again. Sometimes this isn't completely foolproof, so sometimes it may not be able to infer specific background by text. So you can do something different, such as blurring the background. So in this case, I'll blur the background since I had a hard time inferring a cityscape, but you can see the blurring and no problem with blurring the background. So now the foreground looks a lot more pronounced. And under the size and placement, you can also adjust the aspect ratio again. So let's say I was on another platform, I was updating this to like a story. I would just click on the specific aspect ratio of my device and then click expand background. And you can see it manually filled in everything for me and kept everything else the same. I was able to preserve pretty much the entire foreground. The last feature I will be showcasing is on their console page. So we can go under console and under product shot editing. Bria gives us a feature that allows us to do calibrated automotive product shots. So here I can start a new project, and we can call this race car project. And we can put in the specific vehicle models like Tesla Model 3, or in this case, I'm going to be putting in a Zinger 21C, which is a specific name for a hypercar. And here you can create new session, and let's just call this something generic like session. And here we can select our vehicle images. So in this case, I have 5 images of the Zinger 21C, and we can click that and select open. And this will allow us to refine images of our product, and in this case, this is the Zinger 21C, using Bria's options. So again, we can change the aspect ratio. So let's say I wanted to change the aspect ratio to be like 4:3. We can expand the background. And it was able to fill out the rest of the city skyline and the road for us. You can see some of these options are restricted by premium, but you can access other aspects. Again, you can change the scenery by text or by image, or just make everything a solid color. And we also have access to their modify objects section. So let's say I wanted to remove the back wheel of this car. We can select over it and then click erase. Another handy feature that Bria provides on their platform is access to documentation about their API. So as a developer, you can leverage this documentation in order to get information about specific features of Bria. So for example, under image generation, this will provide us specific endpoint URL configurations. So you can go to endpoints, and outlined on this page, we have associated operations with URL endpoints in order to leverage each of Bria's features. So here, it gives us access to making a curl request that will allow us to generate an image. Let's say we wanted to generate an HD image, so I'll go under the HD model section. And this will allow us to leverage Bria's HD 2.2 model to create a high resolution HD image. So you can click try it in order to give it a shot. And the important thing to configure here is the model version. Make sure it's set to 2.2. And under headers, you have to specify your API token. So in the field, specify API token, and in the value, we'll have to put in your API token. So you can access your API token by clicking on My Organization, and you can create an API key if you don't have one. If you do have one, just click Copy API key for your specific key and paste that value here. Once you have it pasted, you'll be ready to configure the body of your JSON. So in the JSON, we can specify the prompt that we want. So in this case, I want an image of a book to be generated that is HD. And then click Send to send your API request. And you can see here, it will output URLs of the outputted HD images. And since we wanted 2 results, it'll give us 2 image URLs. In the next step, I'll be showing you how you can leverage these API outputs in order to create a software as a service application using a Python library called Streamlit. Provided with this API URL access now, we can leverage the data output from our API requests in order to create a software application. So in this case, I'll be demonstrating a software as a service application that I created using Cursor called Product Snap. And this is a smart product creator application that leverages Bria API's endpoints in the backend in order to create a text-to-image product prompt, and then walk you through a workflow in order to make modifications to the product, like in a general product design environment. So in order to get started, you can follow the instructions here in your terminal of choice. So in your terminal, I went inside of my desktop, and you can copy this first command here at my GitHub repository, Bria AI demo. And in your terminal, type in the git clone command, and you can change directory to go inside of that specified path. And then you're going to be creating a virtual environment in Python. So you can do Python 3 tag m venv for virtual environment, and we can call this environment Bria demo. And a virtual environment is like an isolated environment on a machine of your choice that allows you to install specific libraries that can be leveraged by your code base in order to make an application possible. So in order to activate this, we would do Bria demo bin activate, and that will spawn our virtual environment. And then in here, we can install our libraries. So we'll need Streamlit to render all the components for our web application, and then .env for specifying our API key. And give it a second for all the libraries to be installed. Once you have all the libraries installed, you can open up this code base in an integrated development environment of your choice. For this demonstration, I'll be using a code editor called Cursor. And if you want more information about Python and where to get it, you can visit the python.org website and click this yellow button here in order to download the latest version of Python. And for library management, I would highly recommend getting pip in order to install libraries onto your machine. So with Cursor, click Open Project, and you'll have to click on Bria AI demo that you saved on your specific path. And you will need to create a .env file, and an .env file will contain specific variables or information about your environment, your development environment. So click New File and then type in .env. And outlined in the README is you have to provide the Bria API token inside of that .env file. So here, and given your API key from earlier, if you want to know again, it's under Platform Bria AI Console Account API Keys. You'll need to copy your API key again, and in Cursor, you'll paste it inside of this place here. And once you have that, make sure you save your .env file. To those of you who haven't used Cursor before, I'll just briefly go over their editor base. So here I have the README for this project open, which includes information about the project. And you can click this side view in order to get a preview of it. And here you have access to each of the folders and files included in this project. And I have all the API endpoints that we leveraged from the Bria API here. So you can visit any of these for reference. So I have the generate image, which generates an image from a text prompt with specified parameters like the aspect ratio and the seed for adjusting the randomness. I have the product cutout, which removes the background from an image and creates a physical cutout of the product. I have the increased resolution, which enhances the resolution of the product to look more realistic. Generate pack shot, which creates a professional pack shot of the product itself. Add shadow, which generates a shadow in order to give the product a more realistic appearance. And then finally, generate lifestyle, which gives a lifestyle shot by taking the product we generate using the software and putting it inside of a relevant background. So here, the bulk of the API code is inside of this path Bria API. And here, we have like each of the steps of our software outlined with its own API file. So here we have text image, shadow, resolution, product cutout, pack shot, and lifestyle. And each of these files essentially imports the request library for handling the URL, OS, and .env. So .env loads our .env file, which contains our API keys. So here we set a API variable, and we set it to the environment variable, which is our Bria API token. And then here we have our API endpoint to generate a lifestyle given our image URLs, which is the input of the function. And I have some pre-configured specified things, such as the scene description, which I want it to be living room interior on a kitchen counter, and only give us one result, set the original quality and original optimized description to true. For pack shot, I just have a simple URL and feed it in our API token with the image URL we want it to generate a pack shot of. For product cutout, it's a very simple header section. Resolution for increasing the resolution of our image. Shadow for applying a shadow, and I have pre-configured values here. But in the code, we provide a form that allows the user to configure any of these values. And then we have text image, which given a prompt generates a HD resolution image with a specified seed and step value and an aspect ratio value. And here I have a default conditional that checks if the seed is not equal to 0. So if the seed is 0, we have no seed. But if it's anything greater than that, then we start adding randomness and entropy to our outputs. So that's where we specify the data value to feed into our API. So the bulk of the code that contains the actual front-end portion for our software is inside app.py, where we import each of the files respectively under the Bria API directory, such as generate image, product cutout, increase resolution for the functionality of our software. And then we specify the styling under our CSS section here for Markdown. And using the Streamlit library, which we import at the very top here, we create the software. And in order to see this in action, we'll have to open up the terminal again. And this is where we activated our Bria demo virtual environment and installed all of our libraries. You're going to run Streamlit run app.py. You can tab complete it. And that will spawn up a localhost server. And I recommend using a browser other than Safari. I use Brave, and you can go visit the localhost server instance. And this will allow us to access ProductSnap. So just to give an overview of what ProductSnap is a smart product creator, and this gives us a streamlined workflow for creating a product from a text to generating the product and then enhancing the resolution, adding a shadow, and finally adding a final lifestyle touch in order to give it the final pop, which you can use for advertising or other functionalities such as product editing. So let's demonstrate this application. To begin, we're going to input our product. So instead of a ceramic mug on a wooden table, let's say I want an elegant perfume bottle. And you can specify the aspect ratio, the seed, and the number of refinement steps. I kept them at default for this example. And you can see it takes a moment for everything to run. But once we have that, you can see it generated a really elegant picture with 2 perfume bottles in it. So for the next step, we can go to cutout. And that will leverage the cutout API endpoint. So that calls this function whenever the button is clicked. So the 2 main files to be looking at if you're following along in cursor are app.py, which houses all the software. So in this case, we have all the choices outlined as pages in our code base. So we walked through the first step, which was generating the product image itself. So on that page, we were generating the product image. So here, you can see we had this text here that contained the little color palette. And it follows, and that's because it is a subheader. And you can see we have this little form here. This form is made up of this code where we ask on the first column the text input. So this is the text input here. We also ask for the aspect ratio, which is in the select box with the option specified in this drop-down menu. We also ask for the seed, which is a slider value between 0 and this gigantic value, and then a slider for the number of refinement steps, so you can specify the seed and the refinement steps. And then finally, we have a button, a form submit button, and once we get a value, which in this case is a value from the API. So if we get a on click on this button and to check for a click, we use this conditional where we check the truthiness of submit, and whenever a user clicks on the submit button here, it will induce the state to be true. So submit will be true, and then we will generate an image using the API. And if we go to the function definition here, generate image, we see that it's imported from the text to image file of Bria API, so we can follow that logic. And in here, we import the following libraries. So we import requests for making our URL requests, and then .env for loading our environment variables. So I initiate .env by initializing the load .env value, and then I retrieve the Bria API token that we specified in .env earlier. And here I have this method stub, which asks for prompt, the aspect ratio, the seed, and the steps number, which if we reference back to our form, we see all those values present. And then we specify the headers, the API token, the content type to be JSON value, and our data field, where we input all our prompt, our aspect ratio, and the number of steps. And then we return the image URL output that we get back from the API that Bria provides. So if you follow along this code here, that's for our first form, which is generating the product image. So let's generate one more perfume bottle. So now looking at perfume bottle. Nice. We can go ahead and go to the cutout section. And the cutout section is defined by our second step here. And you can see all it does is if we click the cutout product button, which is down here, it will invoke this following function, product cutout, from product cutout. And it just calls this API endpoint here with our previous image URL and return the result URL from the API contents. So let's click cutout product. And this should just keep the perfume bottle in the foreground in place and just eliminate the background completely, which is what it does. Next step is enhance resolution. So this corresponds to this part of the code, which is enhance resolution. And once we click the enhance resolution button, this will invoke this increase resolution function, which is under the resolution file. And this calls this Bria API endpoint, which increases the resolution by a factor of 2 and returns the result from the JSON output of the API. So let's click enhance resolution. And you can see here, previously, there was a little bit of fuzziness around the size of this perfume bottle, as well as the contents of the perfume bottle. And this just amps up the resolution of the pixels of the perfume bottle. Moving on is our pack shot. So now that we have our increased resolution, a pack shot will scale down our image and also give us a steady background color. And in cursor, if you go to the next choice section that's specified in our form, you can see generate pack shot. And if we click the button Generate Pack Shot, it will invoke this function, which is inside the pack shot file here. And this is just a very easy API endpoint. We'll just generate API pack shot with our previous image URL state and then return the status URL, result URL field of or response JSON output of the API. So let's click Generate Pack Shot. Nice. And then let's click Add Shadow. This will add a shadow for us, and it's all the way down here. And you can see we specify the form with Streamlit using the form field here. And we give this form 3 columns, one asking for the shadow color, which is a text input, a slider asking for the intensity of the shadow, and a slider asking for the blur amount of the shadow. And finally, we add a submit button to the form to apply the shadow. And once this button is clicked, this will invoke this function called add shadow, which is inside of the shadow file here. And this will add a shadow and provide our inputs that we specify within the form, such as the shadow color, intensity, and blur to our image. Okay, so let's give this a shot. So I select black as the color, the intensity amount, and the blur amount. I could click Add Shadow. You can see it makes the image transparent again, but it will add a dim shadow to our product shot. Finally, we have our live shot adder. And in our software here, if you go back to the very final part of our code, which is generate lifestyle shot, we specified a button which is clicked when you want to add your shot, and this will invoke this generate lifestyle function, which is specified under the lifestyle file, which will give a scene to the photo. So apply a AI generated background using this endpoint lifestyle shot by text. So let's click generate lifestyle shot and see it in action. Nice. And you can see it gave a scene to our perfume bottle and it put a table underneath a perfume bottle. We can see the applied shadow. And in the background, you can see like a kitchen countertop with a plant in the background. If you want to increase the size of your image, you can click this little button up here and you can download it and do what you want with our product. So in this video, we covered how you can leverage the Bria API endpoints by generating your own API key, how you can look over the documentation for getting access to each of Bria's AI functionalities, such as generating images that are HD resolution, or editing and applying manual edits to photos. And we also walked you through how you can leverage Cursor in order to make a very simple Streamlit software application that will allow you to leverage Bria's APIs in your backend to generate a product and then apply generative edits to your specific product shot.